Hey beauties, welcome back to the show. It's story time, so grab your skincare or drinks and have a seat. So tonight's story comes from one of our viewers in the Philippines. Her name is Vie, and Via had been watching this channel for quite some time, but she told me she never found the courage to share her own experience, well, until now. And she told me that listening to other people's encounters made her feel less crazy or less alone, because she has been dealing with a lot her whole life. She can see things that shouldn't exist, things that make you question everything you think you know about reality. And the story she finally shared with me takes us back to when she was just a teenager in high school. Her school wasn't just old, it carried with it a long, heavy history. And what happened there would change the way Via looked at the world entirely and show her just how dark it can really get. So, let's begin our story. All right, so first you need to understand something about Via's school. She didn't specify which part of the Philippines the school was in, so we do not know the exact location of the school. But what we know is that this place was ancient. So we're talking early 1900s, built during American colonial times. So the school had seen everything: wars, typhoons, occupations, you name it. But people say the land itself was cursed long before anyone ever thought to put a school there. The locals have traditional stories about supernatural entities like aswang that are part of Filipino folklore. So when you're dealing with old buildings in the Philippines, these cultural beliefs often become part of the story that grow around them. Now let's talk about the Gabaldon building. Its real history: back in the American colonial period, these were standardized schoolhouses named after Gabaldon, the politician who pushed for public education in 1907. An American architect, William Edward Parsons, designed them like templates so they could be built quickly all over the country. So between 1907 and 1946, over 1,000 went up. And you can actually spot them by their look: big windows, high ceilings, capiz shells, raised floors, and those wide verandas built for the tropical heat. But here is where it gets dark. When you think about what these buildings have witnessed over the decades, it starts to make sense why so many of them have ghost stories attached to them. During World War II, the Japanese occupied the Philippines from 1942 to 1945. It's documented that many public buildings, including schools, were repurposed by the occupying forces. Some were used as garrison headquarters, detention centers, or for other military purposes. The Japanese military did use harsh interrogation methods against suspected resistance members, and this is historical fact. So basically, these beautiful school buildings designed for children's education and hope suddenly transformed into places of fear and suffering. The same high ceilings that were meant to keep students cool became echo chambers for screams. Those large windows, designed for natural light, witnessed unspeakable darkness. There was active Filipino resistance against the Japanese occupation, and many resistance fighters were captured, tortured, and killed. And when you consider that schools are community centers, places where teachers, parents, and children gathered, it's likely that some of these buildings saw the detention and torture of people the community knew and loved. Teachers who had once taught lessons in those very rooms, parents who had attended school events there, young people barely older than students. And after the war, they turned it back into a school, but the darkness stayed. Students would find their lockers slamming shut by themselves. Chalk would write messages on blackboards overnight. Kids reported feeling invisible hands grab their ankles on the stairs. The temperature would drop so fast, you could even see your breath, even in the tropical heat. But out of all the buildings on the campus, one stood out. The Gabaldon building. Even the teachers would cross themselves walking past it. Every sunset brought this heaviness, like the air itself was pressing down on you, trying to suffocate you. Nobody wanted to be caught inside after dark. Even the janitors refused to clean it alone, and the stray cats that roamed campus would literally go out of their way to avoid it. The upperclassmen, they would always warn the new kids with the same words. If you hear the sound of chains, pray you're fast enough to run. So this happened on a Saturday night in October. Via and 10 other students were staying late to finish their science project. Their teacher, Mrs. Delgado, had given them permission to use the lab until midnight because they were behind on their requirements. So 11 teenagers crammed into a classroom, fluorescent lights humming overhead, everyone trying to stay focused, but also goofing around because, they're kids. They're sharing snacks, telling jokes, playing little games to keep their energy up. Just normal teenage stuff. But around 10 p.m., something shifted. Lyra, this quiet girl who had always been sensitive to things others couldn't see, she suddenly went dead still. All the color drained from her face, and her hands started shaking as she slowly looked up from her textbook. "Shh," she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. "I think someone's here." Everyone turned to stare at her, but Lyra was looking past them, at the empty doorway leading to the dark corridor. The laugh track died immediately. Then Irene, this girl who was always doing stupid things for attention, she gets this look in her eyes. This reckless, dangerous look. She stands up slowly, making sure everyone's watching her, and says, "You know what? Why don't we check out the Gabaldon building? Let's see if the stories are real." The room went ice cold. Their class president, Rosario, who was usually the responsible one, just stared at Irene like she'd suggested they jump off a cliff. "Are you insane?" Her voice cracked. "No, absolutely not. I'll kick anyone off this project if they even think about going there." But something had changed in the air, this electric feeling, like right before lightning strikes. Several students found themselves looking toward the windows, where you could just barely make out the shape of the Gabaldon building through the rain. This dark mass squatting against the sky like something cancerous. The rain kept pattering against the windows, and the building just sat there in the darkness. And then around 11:30, as they were packing up, Rosario did something completely out of character. She grabbed Via's arm hard enough to leave marks and pulled her aside. "I want to go," she said. So quietly, Via had to lean in to hear. "Something tells me we'll find something interesting there. Something we're supposed to see. And I want you with me." Via stared at her friend, looking for some sign this was a joke. But Rosario's eyes had this glazed quality, like she was hypnotized or something. And against every survival instinct screaming in her head, Via heard herself say yes. And that is when she looked down at the paper in her hands, her neat project notes, and felt her blood turn to ice. Someone had drawn a chain across it. Not just any chain, but one that looked so real, it seemed to move on the page. Each link was perfectly detailed. 11:55 p.m. 11 kids creeping across the wet campus toward the Gabaldon building. Their footsteps echoed off the concrete, way too loud in the dead silence that had settled over everything. And the building loomed in front of them like something out of a nightmare. Those tall windows just reflected blackness, even with moonlight entering through the clouds. The main entrance, this heavy wooden door with iron reinforcements, was standing slightly open, which was weird because maintenance always locked it after school hours. Before they went in, Via turned to the group. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Whatever happens in there, whatever we see, whatever we hear, don't scream. Don't run unless I tell you to. And for God's sake, do not touch anything that doesn't belong in our world. The second they stepped inside, everything changed. Outside, it was cool and wet from the rain. But inside, the air was thick and warm, like breathing through a wet blanket. It pressed against their skin, made them feel claustrophobic, even though the ceilings were high and the hallways were wide. Every step made the old wooden floors groan, and the sound echoed through the corridors in ways that didn't make sense. Those big shell windows kept rattling, even though there was no wind. It was like the building itself was alive, breathing, and watching them. Some of the braver kids tried to laugh it off. "It's not as bad as everyone says," Jake whispered, though his voice cracked. But Via and Lyra, they knew better. Their skin was crawling, every nerve ending raw. The air was wrong. Everything was wrong in that building. As they went deeper into the building, past empty trophy cases and old bulletin boards, the temperatures started doing crazy things. One second, they were sweating in suffocating heat. The next, they were shivering as these waves of Arctic air washed over them. That's when Irene, still high on her own stupidity, broke away from the group. She climbed onto the small stage at the end of the main corridor, where they held graduations and school plays. And standing there in that creepy emergency lighting, she started singing. It was some popular love song, her voice echoing through the halls. And it sounded creepy. And that is when everything stopped. The windows stopped rattling, the floors stopped creaking. Even the rain outside went silent. Lyra went white as a sheet, her eyes rolling back until you could only see the whites. As if she was possessed, her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Still, somehow everyone could feel that she was trying to say, "She's here. Oh God, she's here." Via rushed forward and yanked Irene down from the stage. "Hey, let's get out, now." And that is when they heard a noise. The chains. At first, it was barely there, just the whisper of metal dragging across old wood. So faint, you might think you imagined it, but this sound got louder, more insistent. And there was something fundamentally wrong about this sound, like fingernails on a chalkboard, but 1,000 times worse. It was iron links scraping against stone and wood. But underneath that was something wet, sliding, like whatever was making the noise was leaving a trail of something thick and dark. The kids froze. Every living thing around went quiet, like nature itself was terrified. The chains were moving through the building, but not in any way that made sense. Sometimes the sound came from right above them, like something massive being dragged across the ceiling. Other times it echoed up from the basement, rising through the floorboards. Then it stopped. Several kids started hyperventilating. One girl started crying silently, pressing her hands over her mouth to stay quiet. And that is when the chains came back. The sound exploded through the building. The metallic dragging became violent, like whatever was making it had been driven insane by their presence. The chains slammed against walls hard enough to shake the whole structure, crashed down staircases with a thunderous noise. And the sound got worse. It wasn't just chains anymore. It sounded like maybe a dozen people in shackles, all running through the building at once. But the rhythm was all wrong. Like whatever was making this noise didn't move the way humans do, you know? And that's when they all just lost it and ran. No more trying to stay quiet. Now they are gasping, crying, feet pounding on those old wooden floors as they stumble through these twisting hallways with nothing but those dim emergency lights to guide them. And behind them, the chains were getting closer. This thing was moving faster than anyone could possibly run while dragging heavy metal, crashing through doorways, bouncing off walls. It was coming from everywhere at once. They rounded this corner near the main staircase, and that is when Via saw her. There was a woman standing at the end of the hallway. She was just standing there, perfectly still in those shifting shadows. And the feeling coming off her, it was like all the warmth and hope had been sucked out of the air around her. Her clothes were completely soaked in something dark. Not just stained, it was soaked. You could see these patterns across her dress that looked like violence, handprints around her neck, dark spots that looked like old wounds, this spreading stain across her chest. Her hair was hanging down over her face, all matted and tangled, like it was made of shadows instead of actual hair. And through the gaps, you could see skin that was pale and waxy, like a body that had been in water way too long. And there was this massive iron ball chained to her ankle. Not like modern handcuffs or anything, this thing looked medieval, brutal, like it had been made to cause maximum suffering. This iron ball, it was about the size of a person's head, covered in rust and what might have been dried blood. And you could see deep scratches in the metal from decades of being dragged across stone floors. Her fingernails had grown into these long curved talons, yellow and cracked like bird claws. And then she lifted her head. Her hair parted just enough so you could see one eye. It was pitch black, hollow, and empty. That eye locked onto Vie, and something just broke in her mind. She could feel the decades of suffering in that stare, all the agony of everyone who had died screaming in that building. This was someone who had been tortured past the point where they were still human. Real slow, she raised one of those clawed fingers and pointed, not at Vie, but past her into the darkness, at something only she could see. Her mouth opened like she was going to speak, but instead, this sound came out, like wind blowing through a cemetery, like someone's last breath, like chains being dragged across graveyards. Then she was just gone. For a split second, you could still see that iron ball hanging in the air where her ankle had been. Then it disappeared too. The chains went quiet, but somehow that was even more terrifying. So after that night, none of the students ever openly talked about it. Sleep became impossible. They woke up screaming from nightmares that were so real. You could actually taste metal in your mouth, feel those heavy chains wrapped around your own legs. Always the same dream, back in that building, but this time they were alone, and she was hunting them through hallways that kept changing and twisting like the building was alive. Some of them swore they could still hear the chains during regular school hours. It started quiet, but then it got louder and louder until they were 100% convinced that everyone around them had to hear it too. But when they looked around, their classmates were just staring at them with this look like, "Are you okay?" Others started seeing her in reflections, mirrors, windows, even puddles, always standing right behind them, always with that dead eye, staring, always pointing at something just out of sight. It got so bad that some of these kids covered up every mirror in their houses and wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. 3 students transferred to different schools within a month. Their parents said it was for health reasons or family stuff, but Vie knew better. The story quickly spread through the whole school, and each time someone told it, it got scarier and more detailed. But the main point never changed. There had been something evil in that building, and it had been waiting for the right moment to show itself. And after that incident, nobody made jokes about the old warning anymore. Those words became like a curse everyone knew by heart. If you hear the chains, you need to run for your life. The school officially banned students from the building after dark, but that didn't stop the sightings. Security guards kept reporting shadows moving through empty classrooms. This silhouette of a woman dragging something heavy behind her. Maintenance guys found scratch marks on the walls, deep gouges that looked like claw marks, like someone or something had been desperately trying to escape. On really quiet nights, when there's no wind and the campus is totally empty, people say you can still hear those chains, starting in the basement and working their way up, floor by floor, room by room, like she's searching for something she lost a long time ago. Some people think she's the spirit of someone who died during the war, maybe a resistance fighter or teacher who got tortured in that basement. Others say she's something way older, something that's been feeding off pain and suffering since way before that building was even built. Years have passed since that October night, and Via still lives in the Philippines. And the thing is, whatever's been watching her since that night doesn't care about time or distance. She still wakes up to the sound of chains scraping across her bedroom floor, still catches that pale eye staring back at her from dark corners and bathroom mirrors. And sometimes in the darkest hours, she thinks about the other students who were there that night. How many still hear the chains? The building's still there, and students still attend classes during the day. The administration installed new security, motion sensors, cameras, all the latest tech to monitor the building at night. But the cameras only show empty hallways. The sensors go off, but there's never anything there when they check. And the guards, they keep filing the same reports about shadows moving through empty classrooms and strange sounds echoing through the halls. So that is the end of Via's story. What do you think about all this? Maybe she could be guarding the building rather than just haunting randomly. Maybe she is trying to make sure what happened to her never happens to anyone else. Or maybe she's just warning people about something even darker that's still trapped down there. Either way, Via's story shows that some places hold on to their history in ways we can't fully understand. And sometimes that history reaches out to remind us that it's still there, still waiting, still demanding to be remembered. Okay, that is a wrap for today. I hope you guys sleep well, and I will see you guys soon in our next episode. Bye-bye.